So interestingly, Cristan and I are here to talk about when DevOps met service delivery. And actually, when we're preparing about the talk, we thought, well, actually, we don't only mean service delivery, we mean ITSM just generally as a concept. And continuing on Jamie's history lesson earlier on, which was quite timely, cast our minds back to 2009, which was the first DevOps days in Ghent. And that was 14 years ago. That was when DevOps came into our lives and we started talking about DevOps and changing the way we work, putting Dev and Ops together and all that stuff that we know. 20 years before that, ITSM or ITIL, one of the most popular codifications of ITSM, was introduced by the Central Computer and Telecommunications Agency that hasn't existed since 2000. But that was introduced 2 years after I was born. So that was a long time ago. Fast forward to 2023, we have mature cloud providers, including the big three. We have the influence of the Accelerate book and Dora research and everything that brought, and where it took DevOps as a hit movement into a more mainstream movement. And we have Team Topologies that was published, I think, in 2019, and that influenced how we think about teams, how we think about organizing ourselves to optimize for flow. As well, in 2023, it's more popular than ever to have cross-functional teams that are aligned to a value stream, and they build, ship, and support their own software. So this is the context in which we're talking. Plus, since Accelerate was published, I think in 2018, alongside these 4 metrics that indicate software delivery performance, a quick check, put your hand up if you know about the 4 Accelerate metrics. Great, perfect, almost half the room. So these 4 metrics indicate software delivery performance, and they were used as a proxy for understanding how the DevOps maturity of a team or an organization, and that predicts organizational performance, and that's the success of Accelerate. But then the latest state of DevOps reports that are related to Accelerate and Dora, which is the research related to it, they start talking about reliability and operational performance as a 5th metric, which started to emerge. And interestingly, in the latest state of DevOps, they talk about burnout as well. So there's a lot going on with DevOps that's past the first time it came up. Our thesis today is that DevOps and ITSM, this concept of ITSM, are actually symbiotic. They seem contradictory, and we've always seen DevOps as a new movement that will replace ITSM. But we're here to say that a lot of the things that we practice together with Cristan actually are have both practices together. So, quick introduction. Who are we? First, Cristan.
Hi everyone. I've chosen to sit down because I'm a lot more vertically challenged than Tolly, so I don't want to just stand up next to him for the duration of the journey whilst he speaks. I'll speak in the second half. I'm Cristan Massey. I am the head of service delivery at Cinch. Previous experience out of IT. I was in the army straight from school, and then I've transitioned into tech, where I've been in predominantly IT service management, from service design to transition to service delivery, in which I lead up teams and do a lot more of sort of the team management responsibilities nowadays.
Thank you. I'm Tolly. I studied mathematical physics, and then got into software by working on software that built an optimization engine for a few years. And lately, since I kind of read the Phoenix project and experienced it in practice at a company I work for, and since I read things like Team Topologies, I've been very interested in DevOps, observability, event-driven architecture, serverless, that kind of thing, that kind of stuff. Obviously, I'm the DevOps person, and Cristan is the ITSM person in this context. What do we mean by DevOps? DevOps is a bit of an overloaded term, and I don't know what everyone has in their heads today about what DevOps means, but what we mean is the 3 ways that come out of the DevOps handbook, which is all about flow from dev to ops, feedback from ops to dev, and the continuous learning and experimentation, so the 3 ways of DevOps. ITSM is the discipline of delivering, managing, and improving IT services with a focus for customers, and this is the key thing, the word customers here. Cast your minds back to 1989 and ITIL. ITIL is the most popular codification of ITSM. And these are all the different practices that you might find in ITSM. I won't go through them, but a lot of these have the word management in, which might tell you a lot. So if we put them side by side, ITSM is about managing service lifecycle, aligning services to business objectives, and also making sure that services meet the needs of the organization. So there's a lot about the focus on the service and the lifecycle of the service and ownership. DevOps is about shortening dev cycles, increasing the deployment frequency, and doing all this by creating more dependable releases via, critically, collaboration. And putting these two together, you can provide a structured approach to service ownership and management and the lifecycle. And with DevOps, you can embrace agility of software development process. This is where the two can work together. What we're saying is that ITSM people can play DevOps. So people like Cristan and Dan is somewhere in the crowd. Hi, Dan. Because we've seen it happen. We've seen this happen and happen in a quite magical way. I'll be honest, I didn't really like it at first. I clashed with people who came to me with ITSM practices and said we need to create a cab and all this stuff. No, you didn't say cab, but we did see them as this. They're the flow, feedback, and learning police. We will tell you how to do things. We'll tell you what the boundaries of what you can do is, and go away. We didn't, go and do the coding bit that you know how to do. But actually, we experienced 20+ teams practicing DevOps, so DevOps practices, and they were the kind of very DevOps first teams. There were people in the teams, like Sarika here in the crowd. They haven't seen anything else than DevOps, right? But they were also secretly practicing service delivery, but the DevOps way, the collaborative way. So I think I need to give a bit of context now. I've kind of said the theory of what we think, but this is the context in which, the practical context in which we're operating. So most of the teams were elite in terms of DORA. So this is a quick check they can do online that assesses teams on those 4 metrics that we saw earlier. And what they would do is they would deploy to prod daily themselves, the teams. They would have advanced observability practices, and they would dabble into SRE practices like chaos engineering and SLOs and all these things that the SRE book talks about. But on that same day, they may have to deal with major incidents. They may have to deal with support cases. They may have to deal with big releases, suppliers, onboarding suppliers, choosing suppliers, what happens if something goes wrong, all the relationships with suppliers. And it all becomes really, really hard really quickly. So supporting software is hard. So we might ask teams because it's beneficial for DevOps to support their own software, but it is really, really hard. And this is where service delivery practices come to the rescue. And the two things we want to talk about today is focus on optimizing for team cognitive load. And then the second thing that Cristan's going to go through is what excellent service delivery looks like and what service delivery is really. So first one is you want to optimize for team cognitive load. What that means, well, the reason why we do that is because in this context, the teams are the protagonists. They need to be able to be high performers, and that's why there's a focus on them. So typically, these cross-functional teams that we talked about earlier, you'll have product and tech and UX people, and you have engineers. Any skills, really, this is just a representation. Any skills that you might need to have high-performing teams aligned to a value stream, owning that flow of change and moving along in their own autonomous way. But critically, they need to do this thing: build, ship, support their software, and supporting being the key word. And that becomes a lot. So cognitive load is defined as the amount of mental effort being used in the working memory, and that was a term introduced by psychologist John Sweller. You can take that application, that concept, and apply it to a team. So a team might think about infrastructure, CI/CD, coding, testing, observability, domains for the problem space itself, and it quickly becomes way, way too much. So the thesis is that if you're somewhere up here where you have low cognitive load, the team is the unit of delivery. They're moving as a cohesive team, and they're effective, and they're high-performant teams. If you've got loads of cognitive load, you have individuals all going in different directions down here. Now, this is a pseudo diagram. It's not. I just drew to make a point. But you can think of, and this is all from the Cristan Massey's book that's from somewhere else as well. You can think of cognitive load as 3 different types. You've got the intrinsic, extraneous, and germane. What these mean, intrinsic is all about tasks that are fundamental to the problem space. So you want to know, for example, what your software failure modes are. How does your software break? That's something that you want to know well. Extraneous are things that you kind of, they're related to the environment in which you're doing something, but you don't really want to remember every time how to send instant comms. That's just, that gets in the way. And germane is the type of cognitive load that you want to have, the type that leads to high performance. And it's things like, in our context, we're selling cars, so that was a high value purchase, and like 10K, 15K, 20K. It can't all go on a card. So you need to figure out good ways to pay for a car and help your customers. And ultimately, you want to get to this point where you have, sorry, could you all see that? Yeah. Where you got loads of germane cognitive load, so where you make the difference, a little bit of intrinsic and keep getting better at that, but critically have space for thinking. So why is this important? Why am I kind of prefacing everything and everything that Cristan's going to say with this? Is because I think for teams to effectively build, ship, and support software, they need supporting roles. No matter what's happening in the industry nowadays with all the layoffs and all the different practices that are introduced in various companies in the US specifically, and teams need supporting roles. So in this context, you have a team that builds and ships and supports their software. And we had a concept called automation engineers, and they were basically software engineers that enabled DevOps practices within their team. They sat in the team daily and worked with them for everything that they need. Then we have principal engineers or staff plus engineers that lean into teams, are from the outside. That's why they're in this kind of outer circle. And critically, we have these service delivery managers that help with everything to do with the things that fall through the cracks when it comes to own and supporting software. So before I hand over to Cristan, just to give you some examples to link it to these different types of cognitive load. We want to get better at intrinsic cognitive load and limit it, and we want to completely get rid of extraneous cognitive load. So examples are, well, my service failure modes, which I already talked about, how to reliably release a new service. That's something that might come up, and you need to do that well, but you don't want to be thinking about it all the time. How to handle instance effectively. You want to get better at this. How do you get better at this? It's not something that you can avoid. And with extraneous, you want to remove this entirely. So how to communicate major instance, as I said earlier. Who wants to triage support cases? You want to solve the support case. So you don't want to be thinking whether they're a P1, P2, P3, something you need to do immediately or not. How to create reports and metrics. This is a big one. Yes, okay, we do want reports and metrics, but it's not necessarily something that needs to get in the way. And with that context of cognitive load, I'll hand you over to Cristan, hopefully with enough time, to talk to you about what service delivery really looks like.
Cheers, Tolly. So from there, Tolly's obviously gave the premise of the first point, and it brings us on to the next, which is excellent service delivery. So based on what we've already shared today, the idea is that I'm going to go through some examples to put that into real life of some of the IT service management practices that we've done in a DevOps way and proven some value and success in delivering that. So IT service management has a traditional term, and I use traditional in hyphenated brackets quite a lot, in that the standardized and governance approach can sometimes be perceived as restrictive. And actually doing it in the right way ultimately reduces the team's cognitive load. It can be done by eliminating guesswork and taking away the administrative headache. So that's really pertinent in incident management, as an example. You don't want to be looking at communications. You don't want to be concerned about the stakeholder engagement. You want to be in the crux of it, dealing with the issue, finding the resolution, doing the exciting stuff. Enable continuous improvement. So reducing waste. This creates a culture of learning and is part of intrinsic cognitive load. which really sort of is beneficial in delivering it in that way. Reporting and metrics provide visibility and aid decision making. So when you're looking at that overall strategy and having an understanding of what is happening within your space, the kind of technical debt that you may have, how are we going to bring that to the teams for them to be self-serve and be making the decisions of what it is that they're building, shipping and supporting. And then transposable behaviors that a lot of people within IT service management have help support dev experience. So we are by nature natural facilitators, whether that be in incident management, problem, change control. It helps us mirror that, and when we're doing it in the DevOps way, we can deliver ceremonies, we can facilitate workshops, we can really work on that dev experience. So one of these examples is support triage and major incidents. So in Cinch, we have squads, as already shared, and they're aligned to value streams, and they build, ship, and support the services and components. For service delivery, we spend some time in the build and ship it, but a lot of our focus, a lot of our help and support is in the support area of that delivery. We don't have a service desk. A service desk is predominantly used to have a way of feeding tickets and issues either by our observability or a lot of the time from customers, end users, and then there'd be service desk managers would feed that back into the teams. That works really well in a waterfall approach, but for us, we spent a lot of time on automating the vast majority of what a traditional service desk does. However, there are always things that fall outside, and that's where service delivery come in. So we help and we support and facilitate by ensuring that there's ownership, we bring squads together, and we collaborate and swarm to resolve whatever that issue is. In a lot of the cases, the lower hanging fruit, the support triage, we can create working environments where there's run books when actually some of it can be autonomous and you may not even need to use developers' time, and we build that out. For this to work, though, we have to buy into the so what. So a little tangent and personal experience for me is when I first joined, I got this wrong. I turned up to a major incident, facilitating that major incident, and was asking the incorrect questions. I wasn't focused on resolution. It wasn't the correct environment, and that was a real learning and turning point that actually facilitating things in the right way, creating the correct culture and the safe space in order to generate resolution in the most efficient way is really key, and actually the supporting roles are really key in being able to deliver that. This meant that traditional IT service management SLAs wouldn't work. What I mean by that is you have P1 alarm, a P1 incident that contractually would be 4 hours in which you needed to complete. Now, we have fast-flowing autonomous teams. They would resolve that incident within that 4 hours in terms of the reporting and feedback they were getting. It proved no value. So what we did instead was actually we looked at some more quantifiable, useful metrics that we could report to them. So we looked at some things aligned to DORA metrics, mean time to resolve, what our time to acknowledge was it an incident caused by a deployment? We looked at component-based SLOs and error budgets, and then looked at how we could then base that and then bring that into sort of ceremonies later on and really focus on chaos engineering. So in some instances, these aren't lower level incidents and these are major incidents, and with major incidents come unhappy stakeholders and challenging times. Who here enjoys major incidents? Few hands. Who here ideally wants 0 major incidents? Okay, so everything since day one has been built on the concept that we're expecting, almost wanting major incidents. Hear me out on this. there's hundreds of humans making over 200 changes a day. Obviously, there's focus on the testing, on the pipeline, and everything else, but major incidents are inevitable. And as long as we are creating an environment where it leads to inquiry, learning, knowledge, and improvement, incidents should be and are okay. You're getting benefit. There's a difference between incidents and recurring incidents. You don't want recurring incidents because you've not created the correct culture. It's also important to not just wait for incidents to happen. And this is where we come into another part that service delivery play in supporting and facilitating, and that is the ceremonies that we deliver. Service delivery, collaborating with other supporting roles, help facilitate ceremonies. So when we looked at this before with Tully, the automation engineers and the principal engineers really help create the DevOps practices and understand where the teams are. And then that naturally progresses to service delivery, that based on what that discovery and that action has done, and with further collaboration with the engineers, we will facilitate certain ceremonies to then improve them, so when they do the checks again, that they're at a higher standard and they're learning and having that positive change. One of the ceremonies is a what's alarming you session. That's all about observability. We will look at service blueprints, we will look at component-based blueprints, and we will look at accountability of an area in which a particular team manages and owns. We will then focus on priority definitions, the business criticality of them, and put some basic principles and frameworks in. For example, all of our P1 business critical components will by default have an associated run book. So if there is a failure mode associated to that, it will highlight the basic requirements that somebody needs to do. Again, improving that dev experience, because you don't need to contact them necessarily until you've run through that associated run book and done the necessary prerequisite checks. That then subsequently creates more alerts and monitoring and improves our observability and allows us to sort of improve that major incident process, because our time to acknowledge is directly improved and reduced because of these. Chaos engineering, chaos days. So I'm not here to try and coin and say in an SRE conference that chaos engineering is something that came from IT service management. But what we've done is we've adopted the value that chaos engineering brings and actually put it within the confines of the service management processes. So when we get chaos days and chaos weeks where chaos monkeys are creating scenarios for these engineers and they're breaking the environment for them to do the technical know-how and fixing it, we do that within a major incident process. That way they gain the understanding of, oh, I know that I need to turn up to a bridge. I know how I will get the correct people on the call. I know who my associated service delivery manager is, and it's more aligned to real life scenario. So if that then does happen a week or so later in real time, it's slick, it's efficient, we know what we're doing, and we know the manner in which we need to do it. It's also an opportunity for service delivery managers to understand how they facilitate these and act as an incident manager in terms of the communications they need to send out, the stakeholder engagement, and so on. One of my sort of favorite and team success stories out of all of this and the development that we've done and the collaboration with Tully and other people within the organization is service readiness. So it's around change control, and I can appreciate that that can sometimes be a bit of a dirty word. Who has been part of a CAB before? Change control board, change advisories board. So who's had to seek authorization for their own release by a stakeholder that has no involvement in the development process? Okay, so change control does serve purpose. It supports continuous improvement, promotes transparency, facilitates compliance, enables better coordination, thinking about the change failure rate, it's disruption as well. So how do we bring in that value whilst avoiding impact to autonomous fast flow delivery? And we do that by what we've coined service readiness. So if you look at everything here, that's ultimately a lot of stuff that you put in on a change ticket. We're looking at rollback plans, we're looking at risk, we're creating an artifact that's a single source of truth. Sorry, I appreciate some people were taking pictures there. That was a single source of truth that people can use and reflect on that when a release is in the prerequisite phase, is live, and then is in hypercare. Some of the service readiness basics, so the trusted documentation really helps. It's awareness, it's not approval, so there will be a stakeholder awareness call, but it's not them authorising it, it's them acknowledging any associated risks, and then it's still to the teams to determine how and when that is going to be delivered and if it impedes any timeline associated to it. Driven by the team, it's adaptable for multiple scenarios. We don't just use this for product releases. We've used this for the Queen's Jubilee last year. We've used it for Christmas and the impacts that people not being in the organisation has, and so on and so forth. And then hypercare, so an item of work being done isn't done. There's always the hypercare activity. That's probably the most associated time for risk, not understanding how it's been delivered. So we follow that through until it's a suitable time for that to stop. I'll pass it back over to Tolly just to wrap up for the final minute. I really appreciate your time.
So just to wrap up, it'll only be about 1 minute. I've never seen a bunch of people more able to embed themselves in a team and collaborate and provide amazing workshops like the service delivery people that we're working with Cristan. And I think that's the biggest value because when it comes to support, that's where we need most support. The devs need support to support, really. They need to learn because of the cognitive load, as we mentioned, and because we want to go for this fast flow of DevOps. And ITSM enables that. The people, the process, the light touches that they put in place, the things that we can't get to because we're too bogged down to other things and learning other things as well. And things like support triage, incident management, the ceremonies, the what's alarm you sessions, the chaos days or chaos weeks that Cristan mentioned, and the service readiness. Even though it looks like a cab and it smells like a cab, it's not a cab, and that's the best part of it. And you end up getting here, which is elite DORA teams and giving them space to think and giving them space to operate in that germane cognitive load. And an admission from my side, being here, standing here in front of you, saying that I actually got a lot of thank yous from the team in advocating for service delivery because they were amazing and they really, really enabled DevOps, but they did it in the DevOps way. So that's what you become when you collaborate and you're willing to learn from others. And that's it. Thanks very much.